Music has always been one of the biggest parts of my life. I grew up in the 90s collecting CDs. I learned guitar because of some of my favorite guitar heroes and bands, and I've spent countless nights chasing live music. Then, when I was in college, Spotify came along. And it felt like the greatest thing ever. Every song in the palm of your hand, in the pocket of your pants, all on this device. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't listening to music anymore. I was just consuming it. The music hadn't stopped, but I stopped paying attention. My favorite albums were background music, and songs were just something that you would skip after 30 seconds. I had access to almost every song ever recorded, and yet somehow music felt even less important than it ever had. So I decided to figure out how to get that magic and that spark back. Through my parents' divorce, high school breakups, to pumping me up before wrestling matches, setting my race pace for cross-country meets, being the background when hanging out with friends, music had always been there to help me through the more difficult parts of life, but also there to celebrate the more triumphant parts as well. But the first time I truly fell in love with music, I was sitting in Bible study class in the 7th grade, and a kid in my class named James Eastwood said, "Hey, since we have a fire drill coming in like 10 minutes, can we listen to Stairway to Heaven in order to dissect it?" You know, because it's religious class, we're talking about Stairway to Heaven. And Mr. Shear, the teacher, admittedly, finally said, yes, we can listen to Stairway to Heaven. And I didn't think much of it at the time. I was sitting in the back class with my buddy Zach, drawing what we would call Bug Wars. And nothing really registered with me until the guitar solo kicked in. And then my ears perked up immediately, and I said, like, whoa, this is like the greatest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. And then on my next birthday, I was gifted an electric guitar, and I started playing that thing constantly and listening to all sorts of music. And what's important about the guitar is it had some kind of physical interaction. In fact, all music up until a certain point had some form of physical interaction for my life. Whether it was listening to my Sony Walkman on the bus to school, which eventually turned into the iPod Classic, or even tuning in the dials of the radio stations on my car, music had always been this physical interaction with the medium. Turning the dials of the car radio station to get to Project 961 in the car, or using the iPod wheel and getting that haptic feedback and that sound, always had some kind of friction to finding the music that you were listening to. And when you finally reached ZZ Top from scrolling all the way through your iPod, it just made the first opening notes to the song even that much more enjoyable, because there was a little bit of friction and there was some physicality to it. Then on February 13th, 2013, everything changed with a little green circle and 3 black lines. But see, Spotify isn't evil. Actually, Spotify is quite great. It's extremely convenient. You have incredible suggestion features that allow you to discover new music almost daily. It is relatively cheap. The price of music nowadays is still about the cost of Spotify for 1 month of premium. The problem isn't Spotify. The problem is what Spotify turned me into. Spotify is not evil, but it's made me stop paying attention to the music. Which is crazy thing about this is I didn't even realize it was happening. I went on for about 10 years, still, playing music outside, playing music live. I probably played more guitar in live settings more than I had ever had in my entire life over the next 10 years. I started this YouTube channel, which was great, but I didn't realize how much of a commoditized entity music was becoming around my life. I was trying to make money off of YouTube via this YouTube channel. I was still playing live gigs, which was still fun, but I wasn't listening to music nearly as much. And when I was, it was more to learn the songs, learn the solos. In fact, I was listening to podcasts more than ever without even realizing it. And then one day I get this video suggested on YouTube of quitting Spotify for good and going back to like an iPod Classic. Somebody had done an iPod Classic revival with a modern hard drive and modern batteries and all that jazz. Anyways, it really started getting me thinking of ownership. Morning. So I started thinking, yes, I would like to go back to owning my own music. I don't want some corporation to decide one day, hey, we don't have the music rights to, Taylor Swift. Bad example. I don't really listen to Taylor Swift. We don't have the musical rights to stream the Dirt Drifters anymore. Or some music company decides, hey, I Prevail, that's a sweet version of Blank Space, but Taylor Swift's record company has said you can't stream it anymore on Spotify. Those are the things that I'm like, that kind of sucks. You're paying $12, $13, $14, $15 a month. You should be able to listen to the songs you want. Alternatively, there's this band called Jazz is Dead. They do jazz versions of Grateful Dead songs. The guitarist was the guy from Widespread Panic. This is like in the 90s. None of their stuff is on Spotify, Tidal, any of that jazz. Garth Brooks, none of his stuff is on anything other than his own and like Amazon Music. I can't believe I used I Prevail, Grateful Dead, and Garth Brooks all in the same section of this video. But hey, that's the music that I listen to. And this really got me thinking, hey, I want to start owning my own music again because I want to be able to decide when and where I listen to my music, not some corporation. And what's weird about that is it eventually led me down this audiophile rabbit hole. And not in the sense of like where I need to spend like thousands and thousands of dollars. It's like I just want to have a good quality system. And you know who had really good quality systems? The 1990s. The 1990s had some of the best sound systems, at least in my mind. Late 90s, early 2000s, I think that's when audio music peaked in terms of high fidelity. So what I decided to go out and do was build my own 1990s, early 2000s audio stereo system that somebody would be proud to have back then. And obviously none of this stuff is on sale anymore because it's 30 years old. But the cool thing is, the really cool thing is, you can find all of it at your local thrift stores. Like take this Kenwood A5040 stereo receiver. I found it for 25 bucks at my local thrift store. 25 bucks. New, this thing costs probably like $500, and I'll put like the real price when I get back to editing this video. But I also found this CD player, the Sony CA70 ES CD player. It's a high-end, the ES line of Sony music from the 90s. I found it for 40 bucks on Facebook Marketplace. And then these speakers were like $7 each from Goodwill. They're not the highlight of my stereo system right now. It's a work in progress. But all in all, I got this entire system for like less than $100, and it sounds incredible. It sounds better than streaming some stuff off of my phone. And not saying my phone sounds bad, but when you stream off of Spotify and you're streaming it, you don't have it downloaded, it's going to be lower quality, and then you're using Bluetooth headphones. Playing a CD off of this stereo system sounds incredible. And it made me fall in love with music again. There was some tactileness to it. When you turned up the volume using the remote, the volume dial on the stereo receiver turns with relation to how far up and down you're pressing the remote volume. Like, that's really cool. Modern technology doesn't have things like that. And I know I'm talking about like technology here, but it's the entire experience. Music is an experience. It's not something you just throw on and listen to in the background. At least that's never been the case for me. And having this new stereo system, vintage stereo system, and using a DAP, a dedicated audio music player, I've really had some key moments of returning to musical glory because of the physicality, because of the experience, because of owning my music. Music ownership had always been like my identity. When you had a music collection, it was who you were because you went out and actually bought these CDs. You can buy CDs, compact discs, for like $2 now used. Facebook Marketplace, thrift stores. They're about $5 at the local record store, which is still a bargain of a deal to get some of your favorite music. And some of your favorite music that you can say, yes, this is mine. I bought this. No record company, no streaming company is going to be able to take this away from me. And if you're thinking, hey, Ryan, I really want to support local music and artists as well, Spotify doesn't really do that a whole lot. Neither does any of the streaming services. But what's cool is I bought a Luke Combs CD recently, the most recent Luke Combs CD, and I bought it straight from his website. Artists are still using CDs and still selling them. So going forward, when I have a new release of an album, bet your butt I'm going to be buying it, ripping it to save to my hard drive and put it on my DAP, and then putting it in my CD collection or throwing it on the stereo to listen to it in the high fidelity greatness that it deserves. Because at this point, something weird happened. I stopped skipping songs. I started listening to albums in its entirety. I actually look forward to just sitting down in my chair and listening to a complete album. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't looking at notifications. I actually had them separately. I was just sitting there either reading the liner notes or actually hearing the individual notes and thinking, wow, I'm actually listening and enjoying music. The cool thing about this is it doesn't matter what you listen it through, whether it's a CD player or a DAP or a Walkman or what have you. What's cool about this and why I'm bringing this gear up is every piece has a story. The Sony was my first DAP that I didn't think was loud enough, so I got the FIO M21 and it's become my go-to device on the go. But I also wanted something at the house, something that I connect my TV to and listen to CDs because I was collecting CDs. I wanted a chance to listen to them as well in the original format. It's become its own personal story tied to each little thing, and it's really cool. It's really enjoyable. So I guess the question is, was it worth it? And Spotify's great. It sounds incredible, especially now that Spotify has its own lossless format now. At that point, if you're plugged in to good stereo speakers, it's gonna sound incredible. Sometimes I can't even tell the difference between Spotify lossless and CD quality. But it's never been about sound quality. It was about ownership, owning the music that you loved. It was about anticipating the next song when you're listening to an entire album. It's about hearing the entire album for what the artist wanted you to hear and feel, and see how the songs connected and told a thematic story. It was about the music collection itself. So Spotify didn't ruin music. If anything, it made it more effortless, which is a good thing. But effortless eventually leads to forgettableness, and that's a bad thing. I didn't buy a new stereo because I wanted the sound to be the best in the world. I bought a stereo so I could feel music again, so I can enjoy music again. And somehow, it worked.